Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville, with 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Welcome once again to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller, along with Mike Hightower here in studio. Mike Tolbert is back at the ranch, and we're delighted to have you with us. Don't forget, of course, that the Mike's on Mike program is brought to you by the Jacksonville History Center, where our friend Alan Bliss and his fine staff help keep the lights on and the cameras rolling, as well as our fine donors who help us meet the expenses for this show.
Thank you very much.
Today, the three Mikes are going to have some fun with recently retired legendary weatherman. I'd rather say meteorologist.
Yes.
It's got a little more science to it than weatherman. Otherwise,
you must have been talking to my wife.
Expecting to see this weather bunny come on your TV show as I used to do in the 50s. Anyhow.
You know, he's been trying to cut my credibility down for how long have we known each other, Mike?
Not too long.
Yes.
In fact, I'll make a quick mention about that. Anyhow, our meteorologist, Tim Deegan, is with us, who's now a full-time
Now my dad's happy.
surfer and sun worshiper. He is also continuing as Jacksonville's first dude job as the husband of the mayor, the Honorable Donna Deegan. After an estimated 40,000 weather broadcasts, Tim has decided now to come in out of the rain.
That's
He
crazy.
came to Jacksonville back in 1983 from College Station, Texas, after graduating from Texas A&M.
82.
And predicting
82.
the weather for a local station in nearby Bryan,
I don't
Texas.
expect a journalist to get math correct, Lenny.
It was 1982.
Was it 1982?
Yeah.
And let me think, 2025, 1982. Oh, yeah, 43 years.
Okay. We'll just change that, folks. So rewind your show and bring it back in and we'll make that.
Hey, when it comes to, think about what us meteorologists do. Do you ever hear much more than about 80%? So if I happen to know one fact, that's why we do tides and sunrise. It's the one thing we can nail. So hopefully you realize I'm being respectful, but if I can grab a fact out of the air, I'm going to grab it.
One of the other parts of this that none of you will remember, of course, is back in the old days between 1993 and 2000, Tim was part of the Miller in the Morning gang on WOKV radio.
Oh, back in the days of nothing against current radio, but to me that's when morning radio was.
We had a good
some
time.
good stuff.
In
fact, maybe at some point we can get into it, but it's why I consider amongst the three Mikes, you are my youngest relationship. and we should probably talk about that more in detail now. Or at some point.
Nobody.
I know where that puts me then.
Nobody has ever said that about me at all.
Actually, the wisest relationship, because I don't like to use the word old, is Mr. Tolbert. But anyhow, these are stories. If we have time,
In
I
his
will
case,
be glad.
you can say older when it comes to.
but
Let's get on with this show.
No, we said we're going to have fun, and we're going to have fun.
All right.
Anyhow, since he told us to break it up, let's let him go ahead and start it off. Mr. Tolbert, go ahead.
Yeah, before I get started, Tim, since we got all these memories, I think I first met you on the set of Good Morning Jacksonville in 1982, when I think maybe were early there, and I was in there for the Good Morning Jacksonville show trying to promote the Jazz Festival.
Absolutely, and that's why exactly. Yep.
My recollection is that you were new and nervous. Is there any chance you remember that meeting?
I absolutely do, because I remember, as you said, I was brand new. I just moved here in 82, but I loved the idea of the Jazz Festival. I loved the idea of Metro Park. And then I'll continue this story in that, of course, I was nervous. Back then, I didn't feel I was nervous doing weather, but this whole other TV thing of like we're doing now, being on TV with other people and talking.
Yep.
In other words, if it involved humans and not weather, I would get nervous. If it was weather, I'm good. But you humans, I'm still having a hard time with. But one of my, and it's one of the reasons why I still think of Mike as a friend, because after all, this is all about my ego, is then the Jazz Festival came up, and whether or not he actually recognized me, but I was out there just digging the fact that, Jacksonville not only has a beach, but they have a jazz festival. And that people, there's a big crowd, right? And Metro Park is a cool deal on the river. So good. And I, at least for me, when I thought of the jazz festival, I thought of Mike. And and we were somewhere in the crowd, and Mike, you came up to me and you said my name and shook my hands. Now, you probably could do that with 1,000 people back then, but I thought, man,
You've made it.
I've made it. Mike Tolbert knows who I am. So to me, there was a 1-2 part to that story, Mike, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, we all have those memories of meeting you. It's kind of not able to forget. Listen, as someone like you who had childhood asthma, my biggest memories were hating the cherry cough syrup I had to take, playing checkers with my nanny and wishing I could get outdoors and play baseball. But in ways, it was your childhood asthma, I understand, who introduced you to the mysteries of weather. Take us back to 6-year-old Tim and tell us about that.
Oh, gosh, thank you. So back then I was Timmy with a crew cut. Mike, we've never talked about our mutual asthma situation. So it's interesting they kept you inside. Did they keep you inside primarily because of like the mold and stuff outside, or because I think the way I understand it is, I was in Delaware at the time, is that then during the summer, the mold and the pollen and stuff would get going. That would get my allergies going. Then that would get the asthma going, and then I couldn't breathe. Was that a similar situation for you?
I have no earthly remembrance of that or idea. I don't know. I just know I was told to stay inside and be careful.
Yeah. So you nailed it, really. People ask me, why was I a weather freak? The closest thing to science in the family is my mom was a nurse, but not to earth sciences. My dad was a comptroller with DuPont. So it came out of the air, so to speak. But I do remember during the summers up until I was 8 or 9, that I would be in my room looking out the window at my friends playing and stuff. Now, people feel sorry for me, and I let them feel sorry for me. But deep inside, they really shouldn't, because I grew up that way. So, yeah, I knew I was different, but it wasn't like missing anything. But, yeah, I think I know that as I spent time looking out the window, and, I'd watch the kids play, my head and eyes would go up to the sky, and I would start drawing those clouds. And now, I think what took me to the next level is I would then my mom would tell me that eventually I'd be on the floor with like hundreds of pictures, and I'd start off with one cloud, and then eventually that would become this cumulonimbus, and I would later learn would be a thunderhead, because all boys want storms, right? Yep. But what that tells me is, even back then I was wondering, why do you have two clouds and the one cloud becomes a thunderstorm and the other one doesn't? And I absolutely, if I hadn't been stuck inside just staring at the sky, who knows?
Does that bring some, where your expression is, you need to get out more?
Well, my friends still say that, actually.
I was just
there's think about this, because that continued.
Yeah.
Continued. So here I am in college, and there's boys at parties, there's girls at parties, and then how do you meet people? And then what's the classic question people say to you? What do you think about the weather? Those poor girls that would ask me that question. Maybe I noticed they were attractive, but if they asked me about the weather, they were stuck in a corner for like 45 minutes. And eventually I would meet their friends and realize it's not because they really wanted me to meet their friends. They were looking for their friends to pull me out of the conversation, or pull them out of the conversation.
That kind of puts a new definition on a fair weather friend.
Yes, no doubt about it.
You and we were all members of Leadership Jacks in 1988, 89, if you remember.
Of course I do.
We were, I think we were viewed as the troublemakers of the class. Do you remember when Eleanor Ashby broke us up that day? I can tell you what caused it. We all sat together, and, Eleanor sort of ran that thing as a first sergeant.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yep.
She was almost like a nun with a ruler.
No doubt. But I do want to add, as the story goes on, that one of my weaknesses in life is that I would succumb to peer pressure. So if I did anything unbecoming, it was merely because I was hanging around with people like you.
Well, what happened, if you remember, I'm going to put you, even though you've been said
we're all guilty
dude,
of that.
The first dude,
Yes.
First dude of the city.
Yes.
I just want you to know is Audrey Moran, this was 1988, not 1888. So it was Nat Glover, Tim and I, and we had a crush on Audrey, if you remember. And so I think it was our third class. Audrey walks in, and we're sitting in the back, and she announced that she was pregnant. And we all kind of felt like she had betrayed
Us.
three.
Yes.
And then if you remember, Nat Glover didn't miss a beat and said, Audrey, you weren't supposed to tell anybody. And at that point, we got broken up.
Yes. I think she felt like we were messing up the concentration of the room.
Of the room.
Yeah.
And so you were the youngest of the group.
But there's another part of this group that needs to be told. And I don't know if this is fact, so maybe you can finally verify it. So I've let people know my first early experience with Mike Tolbert. My first experience with you, definitely, I was going to say, was the 1988-89 Leadership Jacksonville class. But we all got names. Do you remember that? We were all given names. And I've told my wife, the mayor, and others that I've always thought that name was given to me by you. Do you remember my name? The name that they gave me, and that lingered. And when I see class, when I see that members of the class, they came up to me and they still will say, "Oh, Tim Deegan." That's the name they gave me, Tim Deegan. And I think to this day,
Did you do that?
that Mike Hightower. I mean, can you imagine him actually coming up with a funny name that might stick? I suspect he.
I am not going to. He could still kick my butt.
No,
I am not about to. I would agree to that. I do not believe that. I don't. And if I did, I will deny
Keep denying it forever.
I do, though, remember, it was not me. I do remember because I think there's a picture that we have of you in that leadership class. And if I remember correctly, you were surfing then. Your hair was not as long as it is now, but it was very blonde. And I think Glover and I were a little bit jealous of why everybody else, the gals, were spending a little more time with you than us. But it was okay. Audrey liked us. And that's all that mattered.
Until she split us up.
And then she finds out that, and it turns out. When we were writing these questions, it was, do you feel guilty about leaving Channel 12? I can tell you right now, knowing Tim Deegan. Hold on. Knowing Tim Deegan.
Do you feel guilty prior to the hurricane season?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is because he's already said that only got 80% of it right. So I was going to do, but
I didn't say only. I was proud at 80%.
Well, the Weather Channel will say 50% chance of rain.
I mean, seriously, to be here with you three, and eventually I guess we'll get to Mike Miller over there.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about earlier.
We don't have to, really.
But for people who don't know, and I'm not just saying this, you three represent. I mean, if there's going to be a Hall of Fame at Jacksonville, you three.
Oh, jeez.
No, seriously.
Hall of Shame.
And no, really, from the angles that you can think about in which decisions are made and decision makers are known, you guys are right there. And so therefore, I am really actually saying this with a straight face. And therefore, if I can set the record straight about something, one thing I am proud of, and I'm not sure others would think it's such a positive, is, and I know you were joking about the Weather Channel, but as a forecaster, I promised myself, once I knew after about 3 weeks, this meteorology broadcast gig, this is what I wanted to do. That I told myself I would never say, or would you see on the screen of a graphic, I made 50%. And unless I was oblivious because my wife was having a baby or something, I think I stuck with that. That if someone ever wanted to spend time and look at over 40,000 broadcasts, you would see 40, you would see 60. But I agree. It's like, why say 50? Why? That's like stealing money.
But that begs another question, and
Yes.
I've often wondered this. Does this mean that 50% of all of us will see rain today, or does it mean that 50% of the people who are looking at me right now will see rain and the rest of you won't?
So this confusion continues amongst others, and it shows.
Glad I asked a pertinent question.
And
Sam.
it shows me Yeah, you can find out things about people by what they care about, right?
Right.
So, and I'm going to the mat on this one. So I have always said that when I made a forecast, and even now, if you're on the beach and you said, hey, my niece is having a wedding, the number I give is how much of the area I think is going to be hit by rain.
Okay.
So let me go back a little bit. I although as a kid in Delaware, DuPont built a huge plant down in Corpus Christi, Texas, so moved there in 1971. And whereas my TV weather guy as a kid was Dr. Francis Davis in Philadelphia, and we could talk about that at some point. But the guy that I quickly learned to respect and want to watch was a guy named Charlie St. John, Corpus Christi, Texas. But as much as I respected him, because Corpus's weather can be a lot like ours, every single day during the summer, even during the driest days, he would say a 20% chance of showers and thunderstorms.
Just to cover himself?
And I remember as a high schooler who was ignorant of television, really, as far as how you did things, I thought if I'm ever a forecaster, because even then I learned, actually, Charlie, if the sea breeze is blowing, the chances of the beaches having rain is like zero. Whereas you folks 30 miles inland probably have a better chance of thunderstorms, even as a high schooler. Mm-hmm. And I swore to myself, I'm not going to do that. So anyhow, I stuck to it, and I'm sorry you had to put up with that long speech. So, but here's where I think the confusion is. And I absolutely respect the National Weather Service and other forecasters because everybody else has their reason. But a lot of other people actually use it both ways, and I think that's why it's still confusing. If you look at the wording sometimes, for instance, and again, this is not National Weather Service, but just think about this wording. If I'm trying to figure this out, what exactly you said, there's a 40% chance of scattered showers. To me, you're saying it two different sides, right? Yeah. If you're saying scattered, there's going to be, but there's 40%.
Well, you know what this says? Words are important.
Words matter.
Words matter.
Words matter. Oh my gosh!
If I don't go back and ask this question, Tolbert's going to say something.
I'm going to say something if you don't let Miller ask his.
Well, I never got to answer my question.
It's probably my fault.
Sorry, I'm just the ringmaster.
I just hold the candles
for these two.
I'm going to, since we're going into hurricane season, during that time, did your brain think differently because of the time of year? Did you just go into a different?
You mean as we approach hurricane season?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Because and in many ways, like if you were to talk to a climatologist, if you think about it, we're not South Florida, so that despite what people think, we really do have winter. We have a variety of weather, and the bottom line is we have from late October through April. The polar jet stream, that is weather coming at us from the west generally, that's what you're doing as a forecaster. But then as you approach hurricane season, not only the adrenaline and the concern of a hurricane, but the whole forecasting situation shifts because as you get deeper in the hurricane season, instead of looking west with the polar jet stream, you're looking east with the tropics. And so I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but yeah, there is a whole shift. There's a whole shift of not only, this can become life and death stuff, but then there's a whole shift in how you're looking at the weather and trying to make forecasting. So as you know, I like to do marathons. Not as frequently now as in the younger days. But therefore, for those of us that do did marathons, I've done over 60. You get into long training runs, 10, 15, 20 miles. And as much as we all like to run,
not all of us, excuse me.
Right, but I mean,
some of us walk.
For even those nuts of us that like to run, when we're starting a long run, we know that some of us it can become mentally monotonous and boring, especially if the whole time you sort of have this tension of I know I'm going to get tired at mile 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever. And so what you learn, especially if you're running with people, is you bring up topics for stories that will go on a long period of time. So you're thinking about the story as opposed to mile 2, mile 3, mile 4. Well, should I say Donna or the mayor? What should I say?
Donna's fine.
Donna's fine?
Yeah, we're friends.
You could say Donna the mayor.
You could say Donna the mayor.
Or the mayor Donna.
I'll say that.
All right.
She gets upset when I say the mayor. and I'm really meaning it, of course, in a loving way.
I was going to say.
But it is sort of the smart aleck part of me too. But I shouldn't be that on a podcast, so I won't call her the mayor. I'll call her Donna. So anyhow, but what Donna and others have learned, and I'm talking about a lot of my guy friends, is at about mile 5 or 10, they'll ask me a weather question. Well, decades ago, I used to think they really would care because I would go and go and go until after the years would go on, I realized they're asking me the same questions. So either they're really complicated questions and they weren't, or they could care less what my answer was. They just wanted someone to make, white noise, so to speak. And so I'm sorry if I'm just throwing white noise at you.
That's okay. I want to take you back to the newsroom for a little bit. The only time I really worked during a hurricane was Andrew. When I was in West Palm Beach at the time, I was at WJNO Radio, and across the street from us was Channel 5, WPTV. And because everybody was awake for 4 days straight, when I got done with a shift on radio, they would send me over to TV to anchor television while their anchors were taking a day off or going over to radio.
Wow.
This went on for like 2.5, 3 days. But I remember the chaos in the newsroom, particularly at Channel 5, where it was running much differently than on radio. And it was pure chaos. What was it like at Channel 12?
Well, and I'm perfectly willing to be critical of my friends there. but here's my guess, is that what can look and sound like chaos is a lot of people trying to get close to factual information. I don't mean that as sarcastic. I mean, they truly are. But especially in that kind of situation where communications are terrible at best, right?
Right.
And yet at a particular second, the red light's going to go on, and we've got to say something to people that is somewhat helpful. No, seriously. And so I think a lot of it is that, which doesn't mean that it wasn't chaos, but I would even say on a regular day at the station, I could see how it sounds like chaos until, we actually. Some people might think here,
They know that this show certainly is chaotic.
Moments before we're going on the air, if they were watching this group here, they'd go, "Aren't you guys? Were you about ready to have this, 30+ minute conversation?" But if you know what you're doing,
see, there's the thing. We don't.
Or now since, because I haven't got to tell the story about us two.
Okay.
And this is what I am wondering, but you kind of answered it for me, because I knew that Mike I had met first. I knew that Mike Tolbert. I knew Mike Hightower was second. No, I didn't know. I was debating between you two because I was trying to decide when we actually started doing that morning show together.
93.
93. Okay, so Mike Hightower first. And that's why I mentioned you're still basically the kid on the block.
He is.
Yeah.
He's the youngest.
Yeah. But truly, I think, and maybe that's why you're on the podcast, you kept things balanced on that.
Yeah, well, I'm trying my very best for this.
I
got to tell you something. Fortunato and those guys were much easier to work with than these guys. I can tell you that. I can put it that way.
But no, that was some good. That was some good time because we had fun times. But when it was serious, you would let me do some decent weather.
I would. The greatest vivid memory was from those days when I was. And what I would do is bring Tim on the phone in the morning. We didn't make him come in. So he came on and did the phone, and all I could remember was Fortunato, who was in a production room next to the studio I was doing the show at. And when you were going more than the 2.5 minutes we were supposed to go.
Who, me?
No, you. All I would hear was this bang at the top of the console. And it was Fortunato saying, stop.
Tolbert does that. That's Tolbert now doing that.
You're right.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
I was going to say,
Please
speaking
do.
of which, go ahead.
Yeah, Tim, over the years, a number of people in television news have run for public office. There was Ernie Mastriani at Channel 12.
Wow.
And Ken Amaro now at Channel 12, and Donna Deegan now at Channel 12, and Deborah Gianolis at Channel 4 ran once. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think about running? Did people ever talk to you about running for public office?
Is this a joke?
No, it's not.
No, people have wondered and have said some things, and I've always wondered, are you making fun of me? Or am I, but there's been some comments that someone who's mentioned every neighborhood over 40,000 times, and I think some people do realize that yes, I'm a weather freak, but I really did fall in love with this area early on, and cared about it. And like 1989, Leadership Jacksonville. Friend of mine, Steve Prom, don't know if you remember him or not. He since has passed away. But he was the one saying, he was a fellow surfer, but also a lawyer. In fact, a mentor, about the same age, but a mentor of mine. And I saw him starting to join boards and starting to, and he was having kids also. And so he cared like I did, but I would just debate the policies of City Hall and Jacksonville business and the whole bit, walking, running, or on the beach or surfing with him. And I saw him take it to the next level. So to be serious, Mike, yes, some people have mentioned that, especially over the last few years, because I do care politically. I mean, because I sure don't want to speak. What am I calling her, the mayor or Donna?
I think you said you were going to do Donna since it's a
Donna
podcast.
the mayor.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she mentioned this, but I would say what took us from being professionals together to then spending more time talking to each other was because we used to, whatever word you want to use, argue. Debate. That's the word. No, we're just debating. But we would debate political policy. And I think initially for me it was ego, because I could tell she assumed just before going on the 11, there'd be maybe some time at 10:40. And at 10:59 we both realized, okay, we better get to the set. I could tell she thought she had won the argument. and so at least initially, I should be saying, I couldn't wait to talk to her again. But initially it was I wanted to talk to her the next night because I wanted to make sure she knew I had won the argument. And so it would continue. But that's really how we got to know each other better.
And has that changed now that you're married?
No, it hasn't. Now to be fair, it's not like we were ever 180. But when you get to that thing of words matter, we would, if anybody was listening to us, sometimes they'd say, you guys agree on 99%. But that one word, and we'd go round and round, and we still do. But that's a roundabout way, Mike, I'm sorry, of saying that I think some people occasionally brought that up, not necessarily thinking, that I would have a chance or would want to, but some friends knew that we did that and still do that. And so anyhow, how long did it take me to answer yes or no? 5 minutes? Sorry.
You could do well.
Yes, person.
You could do well if you did a podcast.
People
actually.
have brought that up, and I could go on and on about how not to be the first dude, because I could tell you my first 6 months in the kitchen with Donna, but I don't want to take too much time on Donna, the mayor Donna.
Well, if you do run for politics, we can nickname you Mr. Filibuster.
There you go. There you go. And I think Donna the mayor would totally understand that title.
Was there any reaction when she decided she was going to run for mayor? Was that also one of those debates that the two of you had?
So that was a big discussion, and it wasn't. Well, do you think you're going to win? As husband and wife, it wasn't. You should only run if you think. I mean, we weren't even thinking that. It was. Do you think you can make a difference? And because I know that when she gets involved, you all know her. That when she gets involved in something, it's going to be 110%. And what about her health? And I mean holistically.
Right.
And so actually our biggest discussion wasn't whether or not she should or shouldn't. She knew that I was 100% behind her as long as she had really walked out the holistic health thing, Of course she knew it was going to be hard work. Of course she knew that it would be 24/7. She cares about it. That's why, and she knew that people would disagree with her. But it was okay, so we know that going in, and who knows if you're going to win or not. But let's walk out this whole process of, okay, day by day, how do we do that in a healthy way? And so I think, to be honest with you, I think that's really the big decision we came up with is that, you know what, because we had developed a lifestyle because of what she'd been through, to where she did not want to be defined by the breast cancer, but at the same time, she'd learned a lot from it that I know she has shared with you all.
Yeah.
And we said, you know what, your lifestyle you have right now is actually a way to keep holistically healthy. So it looks like our answer is, if you decide to run, let's just keep doing what we've been doing, you know?
You and Donna walked up to me on February 20th as we were leaving the event that Mike Tolbert had put together, Jake's Celebration of Life at the Prime Osborne. And if you remember, y'all were walking out, you came up to me and said, you know, Donna's thinking about this, and I'd, you know, like for you, but I think you should think about it, Mike, because she's going to run and she's going to win. And I went, well, I'm a Republican. And you just smiled and said, that's it. But that was February 20th, 2020. Well, you did that. And that was the event that Mike had put together for Jake Godbold. And I remember that as if it was just yesterday. And you were both, I mean, you did it in a very positive way, but I was just thinking of, here we were celebrating Jake's thing, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking back, you made that comment, you and Donna made that comment.
Well, I remember that event, and that was a beautiful event, and hopefully you could tell I wasn't making that in a cocky way.
No,
I didn't.
Because what happened was the way you said it, I thought this is one of those moments. Okay, I'm a Republican, she's a Democrat, and I just said I just can't. I'm a Republican, but I wish you well. But I never forgot that event, and I thought it was fortuitous that we were celebrating this event that Tolbert had put together, which was extraordinary.
It was. And I did not say to you what I did not say that to many people, but I did feel like even back then that if the people that knew Donna, no matter their label, voted, and that if just enough people listened to her authenticity and where she was coming from, and it was because of the whatever you can say was in the room that day. Jake Godbold, when I came, that was, he was the guy, right, when I first came. When I think of the 80s, I think of Jake Godbold.
Yeah.
And Donna had tremendous respect for what he did and how he did it. And she knew I had a lot of respect for Mike Tolbert. And I think probably it was in that room that day that I first had that real confidence that if that was my big thing. I do pray, and my prayer as that election eventually went on was, please just let people pause for a second and listen to her. And there was something about being in that room that day because of what was happening with Godbold that I said, you know what? Maybe there's enough people in Jacksonville that'll, just listen to her.
Yeah. Tolbert, again, you made the difference. I hate to tell you that, but you did. One more time.
Don't feed him. Don't feed him. Please don't feed him.
Well, Tim, when you arrived in Jacksonville, George Windling had already been at Channel 4 for 20 years.
Yeah, the man.
Did you look at George as a competitor? What was your relationship with him?
I'm so glad you asked. Maybe initially, but even then I hesitate because initially I was so new to TV and I was such a weather freak that I was just super focused on getting my forecast right. And so then even as I gradually learned, Ray Boylan was my chief and certainly fantastic meteorologist and well respected. But you're right, with Channel 4, George was the guy. That by the time I was sort of got out of my young kid, just weather freak tunnel vision, George had become really sort of a mentor to me. And it wasn't Harry Schnabel. Do you remember that name?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, gosh.
I don't remember what year this was, but he did something with the city involved with public health I don't know exactly what his title was. He came to me and this was maybe the mid 80s. So I was still pretty young, but maybe had just started doing the 6 and 11. And real quickly he said, Tim, I don't know if you either know this or not, but at least right now in broadcast television, the most respected people are the meteorologists. Maybe because you guys have been around for the longest. I don't know. And he says, even though you're young, you're one of the chiefs now. And he says, if you don't have any competitive problems with it, I would like to meet once a quarter with all of the chief meteorologists at Channel 4.
What a good idea. Wow.
And I thought it was a great idea because he would put together some PSAs and all three of us would be on it. Therefore, all the stations would do it, right? And it would be, some of it was like on lightning safety, but other of it was more pure public health. It wasn't necessarily weather, but they would have us do stuff. And anyway, I thought it was a great idea. But here's why I bring it up. Because it would happen at Channel 4, and I remember my very first time walking in there, and although I didn't feel necessarily competitive with George, I mean, he was the guy, but walking in, to the lion's den of Channel 4, because especially back then, I mean, they were the giant. I can remember, I don't even know what year it was, that sometime during the late 80s, when our station, and I don't think Channel 12 would mind me saying this, our station had a celebration. Not because we won the ratings, and this is talking 6 and 11, but because instead of Channel 4 beating us 3-1, they were only beating us 2-1. I mean, seriously, that's how dominant Channel 4 was. So going into the station was kind of funky. Well, we go into it wasn't George's weather room, but into a conference room. And George could not have been humbler, but still was running the show, mild-mannered. We sat down. He said this very generic prayer so that no one would be, feel uncomfortable, but yet you could tell it was authentic. And then from that point on, for several years, we'd all come in there every quarter, and meet. And so then, in my mind, George, just took it to a whole nother level. So Mike, if there ever was that, although certainly, right, as for his advertising, at some point they wanted me to at least get close to his popularity. But personally, from that point on, I just thought of him as a mentor at the very least. And I even said this to my own folks once we got into the 90s, that nothing against my newsroom, but I think George and I related to each other more than each other's newsrooms. Nothing against them. It's just you're coming from a whole different mindset, and so no. George was always the grandfather, the uncle, however you want to look at that. For sure.
Something similar happened with me too when there was a celebration when I came within 12 ratings points of Lex and Terry.
No, that back in the day, that'd be major.
That was major. That's a huge celebration.
No doubt about it.
Because an AM news talk station. Wow.
Yeah, you were just doing news talk, and who knows what they were doing.
We wouldn't ask.
Yes.
We wouldn't ask. Let's go back to the 80s for just a moment.
Yes.
Because
if we don't do this question, I'm going to catch.
We don't want you to blow a gasket, so let's do it.
I'm on a mission.
Okay.
He's going to ask you something, but Mrs. Hightower wants to know about it. She brought this up.
Would you rather ask the question than I, so you won't get in trouble? Up to you.
All right. This is it. Sue she loves Tim Deegan. So when I told her that Tim was going to be it is. So what happens is I told her that Tim's going to be in the show. Out of her mouth, she says, "Now, do you remember? He was really young, and he's the only person that said we're going to get snow. And for a whole week, Mike, that's all he did, and everybody laughed at him. And I just remember that. Now, you were 26 years old. Now, again, women are different. They never forget anything because Sue still remembers.
No doubt. Our mayor has a good memory. I mean, Donna, the mayor.
Yeah, and I can tell you she still remembers when I screwed up in 1976. So, but she just, as soon as I told her.
Have y'all investigated what that's all about?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Because I was wrong and I'll never be right.
All right.
But tell us about, I'm sorry, I took it away from you. Tell us about, that's legendary, and you got his best friend, Ken Amaro, just ragged you for a whole week.
That's what, in the end, really, because up until then, I think most people, thank God for your wife, but I think most people the only people that really knew that I was forecasting that was if you watched Good Morning Jacksonville. You didn't know it if you were watching the other stations. I think I may have been on radio by then. Certainly, obviously, was on with you guys.
Yep.
So maybe some radio listeners heard it, but certainly the 6 and 11 people didn't hear it. Knowing Ray, as much as he respected me, I'm sure he wasn't up in the morning watching my forecast. So it really, I'm sure, didn't start becoming a big deal until my own fellow reporter did a make fun of Tim on the street. I mean, tongue in cheek, we were friends, you know, but he basically went to the gas stations and said, what do you think about this guy making the forecast? And so I really think it actually, in retrospect, helped me because people who wouldn't have even known I was forecasting that suddenly, and then, you know, for a while it was a joke. And then daggum if it didn't snow. And then the paper did an article about it. And so it was one of those forecasts, because it wasn't like it was a snowstorm. There was enough that accumulated and did some stuff.
We had snow on our lawn.
Yeah, it showed up, and there were great pictures.
They closed the bridges, as I remember, because they didn't have salt to be able to get it done.
Now
that was a different time,
right?
Is that a different time?
And here's here's what's happened.
It's all run together.
Which was good for me. But that was in 86. March 2nd, 86 was my forecast. It was 89 that we had the massive icy snowstorm.
Okay.
Ice.
And so by 2000, that had sort of become, and yet, although I think I did a pretty good forecast with 89, everybody was forecasting some kind of major thing going on. So I do think that something else would happen. But yeah, the fact that my forecast became a joke and then it actually happened helped tremendously. Now, young forecasters at our station, and to me, anybody in their 40s or younger is now young, but they would ask me about that. You know, why did you have the confidence? Why did you? And it really wasn't that I was trying to be brash at all. I really do think it's because, like, I would come in at 2 a.m. And then stay to the noon show. And all we had back then was the 6 and 11. So Ray wouldn't come in until 2:30 or 3. So we wouldn't talk to each other. And although I certainly cared what the evening forecasters were saying, I was just such a weather freak that I really didn't watch them in the evening. And so I was just in my little weather tunnel. I mean, I knew what the National Weather Service was forecasting, but in many ways, I was in my own little weather tunnel. The computer models were still primitive. But I think because I was the youngest guy in town, they had just come out as I was graduating from Texas A&M. So to me, I had some confidence with them. And I get it. There's so many new models that come out now. The kids had to tell me about them. And I wouldn't be surprised if...
see all that spaghetti going on.
No, you're right. Well, I'm even talking before the spaghetti. I'm talking about when you get the raw models before you draw those lines. And that's what we all look at. And my guess is Ray and George weren't as comfortable looking at that stuff. So it was really like we were all on these different paths together. I think if I had been more aware that no one else was even talking about it, I probably would have second guessed myself. But seriously, because I was in and like we just had our first child, so I was really focused on weather and, you know, changing the diapers and making sure my baby lives. I mean, my baby was healthy, but I mean, then I do something stupid, you know.
They do bounce.
Yes.
We're going to change the subject here for a couple of minutes and ask Tim to stay with us. Recently, a very good friend of all of ours, a great friend of Jacksonville's as well, John Thrasher, passed away after a long battle with cancer. John's best known as being Speaker of the House of Representatives in Florida, also a senator. And I know the mayor, Donna, will be happy to know that he was the president of FSU.
Donna was invited by him and his wife years ago.
Oh, that's right.
I happened to go as well. Yeah, so they had a good relationship, so yeah.
Now, John is best known for all of those positions. And as someone who said after his passing, integrity, perseverance, and strength propelled John to success at every level of public service and private industry. Closer to John's celebrity of life, we'll be doing a podcast on John's life when we get closer to I think it's the August 19th celebration that's
August
going
19th,
to be
yes.
in Tallahassee, which hopefully we will all go to.
I first met John in, I think, 1995 when I was doing Inside Source. And he was a member of the Halsey Law Firm. And I would go to visit with Mr. Halsey and talk with him from time to time. And I generally would stop by John's office because he loved to talk politics. So that's kind of how I got to know him. And I think of John as a throwback politician, you know. He was gracious. He was thoughtful. He was somebody who would rather negotiate a difference than nuke the other person. He understood compromise, cooperation, and he was very good at forming consensus. And he was always looking for ways, it seemed to me, to make Jacksonville and Florida a better place. And I'll be honest with you, when I heard he had passed, my first thought was, where have all the John Thrashers gone in our life?
Amen. Mr. Hightower?
John and I, when I first went to Tallahassee, John was representing the Florida Medical Association. I was representing Blue Cross Blue Shield. So in 1980, that's when we first met, and we became fast friends. Even though we weren't opponents. There was a difference between the medical association and us, mostly about reimbursement. But John was just a fantastic. Two things that I want to talk about, pick up on what Mike Tolbert said. First, I wanted to go to one of the most important things, and when he became president of FSU. If you remember correctly, Ed Burr locally was the chair of the trustees, who is, as we all know, is a great friend of the three of us, all four of us here in town. Great person. John and Ed took a lot of heat from the student body and from the faculty when he got it. They just said it wasn't wrong. And, they won. And if you remember, less than 10 days later, there was that terrible shooting. Mm-hmm. And if you remember correctly, that's when John Thrasher showed what he was made of. Mm-hmm. He went in there and calmed everybody down. And I can remember the parents, imagine, they'd never had anything like that. And John went right into what you would call the belly of the beast. He got the students together, he got the faculty together, he brought the parents together, which will then bridge to me of when he was speaker. With John Thrasher, there was order. And I think a lot of that comes back to what he learned as a captain in Vietnam when he had to take the hill. And John shared with me, during that time, he was in command of men, and he had to make decisions, and sometimes there were problems. He had to make a decision of whether to take the hill, and when he did that, there was fatal repercussions, and he understood that. And to pick up on what Mike Tolbert said, he was the person that negotiated over there. Two things real quick. When we would get together, he would just say, do the very best you can, and if you can't work it out, come to my office, and we'll figure it out. He was a great American. Tim?
Does it make sense if I bring up Jim King's name as well?
Sure.
No,
in that kind of... we're politically maybe coming from different places, but we're gonna figure this out, and then we might end up even getting on the boat together and having fun together later. That's even though I know John Thrasher came pretty hard from some specific political points of view, but you did get the idea that all of Florida was his love.
No question about it. I think my greatest memory of John is that when Mitt Romney came to town to do a political event, I think it was at the University Club. Mm-hmm. And John called me up and said, how would you like to come, Mike, so you can meet Mitt Romney? Because he knew that I was an admirer of his. Even though I had a D in front of my name, I was an admirer of Mitt Romney's. I just liked his core base to him. So that was a great memory, and I think we'll have a photo of that we're going to play on the next show.
Yeah. To Mike Tolbert's thing, we could use more John Thrashers.
Okay. Tim, thank you so very, very, very
Truly,
much.
I'm honored.
This was great.
It's
this
been
was
fantastic.
Just great.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
You did. I think between the two Deegans, we have two great program guests that we have on, hopefully on a regular basis.
Would love to.
Now, next week is going to be our 99th episode of Mike's on Mike. Our guest is going to be pollster and political science professor Michael Binder. He just came out with a new polling results, and I know that Mayor Donna is going to be happy about those results, and has probably already seen them. But we're going to have her here, or have him here, I should say, to talk about his poll and how things have changed from a year ago when he did his last one. Some good numbers for both Donna Deegan as well as for Sheriff Waters. So we'll see what happens out of that. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. And on behalf of all of us, thank you all for joining us. Take care.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.